Welcome to this masterclass. Today we're going to talk about power. Not the kind of power that protects, not the kind of power that leads with integrity, not the kind of power that builds, restores, or safeguards. We are going to talk about the kind of power that controls, the kind of power that hides behind charm, the kind of power that rewrites the truth, the kind of power that enters relationships, families, finances, institutes, paperwork, proceedings, and sometimes even the courtroom itself. This masterclass is called Unmasking Power because that's exactly what we are going to do today. We are not here to gossip. We are not here to attack personalities. We are not here to diagnose people from a distance. We are here to understand patterns. Because when you understand patterns, you stop blaming yourself for what was done or diagnosed to confuse you, designed to confuse you. And when the system understands the pattern, they stop mistaking composure for credibility, distress for unreliability, and control for reasonableness. This is where conversations begin. This is the conversation where we talk about domestic abuse. And domestic abuse is not always confined in the home. It mutates. Sometimes it does not end when the relationship ends. Sometimes it graduates and mutates. It moves into communication. It moves into finances. It moves into reputation. It moves into paperwork. It moves into professional spaces. It moves into the courtroom process. It moves into delay, disclosure, silence, and strategy. And the most dangerous part is this. When abuse becomes procedural, it can start to look like respect or a respectable move. It can arrive dressed as concern. It can arrive dressed as a legal strategy. It can arrive dressed as financial caution. It can arrive dressed as reasonableness. It can arrive dressed as just asking questions. It can arrive as dressed as protection and protection of self. But underneath all that presentation, the same pattern can still operate. So control, dominance, image management, blame shifting, punishment, narrative control, and the refusal to take accountability or to just be accountable for anything. So today I want to take you through this carefully. We are going to look at the psychology of power. We are going to look at narcissistic dynamics. We are going to look at why some people are never satisfied. We are going to look at why accountability never seems to land. We are going to look at coercive control as a pattern, not as an incident. We are going to look at how these dynamics can continue through legal proceedings, and then we are going to look at SAFECHAIN. SAFECHAIN as a framework for evidential continuity, participation, integrity, and trauma-informed justice. Okay, so this is not just personal, okay? this is structural, because once you have lived inside a pattern of control, you begin to see something very, very clearly. The problem is not only the person who harms, the problem is also the system that cannot recognize the harm when it changes form. The harm does change form. So let us begin with the psychology of the power. Power itself is not the problem. Power can be beautiful when it is accountable. A parent can use power to protect a child. A leader can use power to serve a community. A court can use its powers to uphold fairness. A professional can use power to safeguard someone who's vulnerable. A survivor can reclaim power as dignity, voice, and self-respect. Healthy power is grounded. It is not afraid of truth. It does not need dominance in every room. It does not need to silence another person in order to feel strong. So healthy power can apologize. Healthy power can listen. Healthy power can be corrected. Healthy power can be a witness or can be witnessed within process. But unhealthy power is different. Unhealthy power is not really strength. It is often fear wearing armor. It is insecurity dressed as superiority. It is a fragile self-image that must constantly be defended. This is why some people do not simply want to be loved, because love alone is not enough. They want to be admired. They want to be obeyed. They want to be centered. They want to be reflected back as powerful, special, and exceptional, untouchable. And if you challenge that image, even gently, you may experience it as they're not going to experience it as feedback, but as an attack. This is where narcissistic dynamic becomes important. They cannot stand a challenge. Again, this is not about casual labeling people. It is about understanding traits and patterns. Narcissistic dynamics often involve grandiosity, entitlement, lack of empathy, exploitation, blame shifting, image protection, and an inability to tolerate shame. At the heart of it is a contradiction. I call it a contradiction because it is. On the outside, the person may appear confident, composed, successful, charming, intelligent, even generous. But underneath, there may be a deeper inability to sit with ordinary human accountability. They cannot bear to be wrong. They cannot bear to be exposed. They cannot bear to be seen as flawed. They cannot bear the idea that another person's pain might require them to change. So instead of accountability, they create a defense system. They deny, they minimize, they project, they accuse, they rewrite, they recruit supporters, they perform innocence, they make the victim look unstable, they turn the story inside out. And this is why survivors often say, how did I become the problem? How did I end up defending myself? How did the conversation move away from what they did? How did everyone start looking at me and reacting instead of looking at their behavior? That is not accidental. This is the architecture of blame shifting. This is the architecture of a narcissist being. Now let us look at the recycler dynamic. This is a word I use to describe a particular relational pattern. The recycler is not simply someone who has multiple relationships. The recycler is someone who moves through people as sources for validation, control, comfort, attention, or supply. One partner is rarely enough because the issue is not the partner. The issue is an internal emptiness that no external person can permanently fill. So, at the beginning, the recycler may idolize you. You are special. You are different. You are understanding. To them, this is what they tell you. You are the one they have been waiting for all their life. You are elevated very quickly. This stage can feel intoxicating. This can feel like destiny. It can feel like you've been chosen, because often what is happening is not love in its nature and form. It is projection. They are not fully seeing you. They are seeing what you provide them. So admiration, energy, beauty, status, care, emotional labor, financial support, sexual access, domestic stability, a public image, a sense of being powerful. So then, slowly or suddenly, the devaluation starts to begin. The same things they praised become the things they criticize. Your sensitivity becomes a weakness. Your intelligence becomes arrogance. Your independence becomes disrespect. Your boundaries become selfishness. Your pain becomes drama. Your memory becomes unreliable. Your needs become pressure. And then comes the discard phase. Sometimes it is obvious, sometimes it is emotional, sometimes they stay physically present but withdraw affection, respect, honesty, or care. Then, when they lose control, when another source fails, or when they sense you are moving on, they return. That return can look like an apology. It can look like nostalgia. It can look like crisis. It can look like sudden kindness. It can look like I still care. It can look like no one understands me like you do. But often the return is not repair. It is retrieval. They are not returning to love you. They are returning to restore access. You are beginning to be a supply again. This is the recycler dynamic. Idolize, devalue, discard, return, repeat. And every cycle leaves the survivor more confused, more depleted, more unsure of reality. You lose your sanity. This matters in court because the same pattern does not necessarily stop at separation. A person who used emotional control in the relationship may use procedural control after the relationship. So a person who withholds the truth in the relationship may withhold disclosure in proceedings. A person who punishes independence in the home may punish legal resistance in the courtroom. So a person who controlled the narrative socially may control the narrative legally. That is why coercive control must be understood as a pattern of behaviors, not just one single incident, not an argument, not bad relationship, not bad personality clash, not difficult person. No, a pattern. Coercive control is cumulative. It is repeated erosion of another person's autonomy, confidence, safety, resources, and reality. It can evolve into finances, it can evolve into isolation, it can evolve into intimidation, it can involve threats, it can involve humiliation, it can involve surveillance, it can involve legal pressure, it can involve reputational damage, it can involve emotional punishment, it can involve creating dependence and then blaming the person for being dependent. And because each act can appear small in isolation, the danger is often missed. A single message may not show abuse, but 300 messages may show a pattern. One financial decision may not show control, but years of blocked access, unexplained transactions, hidden resources, or strategic withholding may show something entirely different. So one application in court may not show post-separation abuse, but repeated process, delay, threats, non-disclosure, and pressure may show the continuing of coercive control through legal means. This is where many systems fail to recognize the pattern. They look for incidents, but coercive control lives in the pattern. They ask what happened on this date, but the real question is what has been happening over time. That is the real question that should be asked. They ask, where is the single piece of evidence? But the real question or the real answer may be, the evidence is in the connection between all these pieces. This is what I call evidential discontinuity. Evidential discontinuity happens when the truth exists, but it is scattered. One party sits in financial record, one part sits in messages, one part sits in medical notes, one part sits in housing records, one part sits in police reports, one part sits in the court filing, one part sits in witness statements, one part sits in the survivor's body and memory, fear and trauma responses. But because the system does not connect it, the pattern is not seen. And when the pattern is not seen, the survivor may be treated as if they are making isolated complaints rather than describing a continued system of harm. This is one of the central failures that I want to address and expose in this masterclass, because the law may recognize coercive control, but recognition alone is not the same as operational understanding and safeguarding, where safeguards needs to be in place. Recognition says this exists. Operational understanding says this is how we identify it, evidence it, interpret it, and present it from being reproduced through process. That gap matters. Now, let us talk about credibility. So, in many proceedings, credibility becomes everything. Who sounds reasonable? Who appears calm? Who has the better paperwork? Who tells a cleaner story? Who looks more organized? Who seems less emotional? Because emotion in court does not apply. But trauma does not always present neatly. A survivor may be anxious. A survivor may repeat themselves. A survivor may forget dates. A survivor may cry. A survivor may seem overwhelmed. A survivor may struggle to explain the pattern because the pattern was designed to be confusing and to confuse them and to continue confusing them. Meanwhile, a controlling person may present very well. They may be calm because they are not frightened. They may be organized because they have had more control of documents. They may appear reasonable because performance is part of the whole strategy. They may speak with confidence because they are used to being believed, because that's their whole being. This creates a dangerous credibility inversion. So the traumatized person appears unreliable. The controlling person appears stable. But presentation is not proof of truth. Composure is not the same as integrity. Distress is not the same as dishonesty. And a clean narrative is not always an accurate narrative. This is why trauma-informed justice matters. Safeguards matter. A trauma-informed approach does not mean believing everything automatically. It means understanding how trauma affects memory, communication, participation, and presentation. It means asking better questions. It means looking at patterns. It means recognizing that the person who appears most polished may also be the person most skilled at image management. And the person who appears most distressed may be carrying the consequences of harm. Now, I want to connect this to procedure. Procedure is supposed to create fairness. So procedure in court is supposed to create fairness. Deadlines, forms, disclosure, statements, hearing, orders. These things matter, but procedure can become dangerous when it is not treated as a neutral while ignoring equality capacity. Two parties may have the same deadlines, but not the same resources. Two parties may have the same right, to file evidence, but not the same emotional capacity. Two parties may be in the same courtroom, but not standing in the same reality. One may have money, representation, control of documents, and emotional distance. The other may have trauma, housing insecurity, financial pressure, fear, and exhaustion. That is not equality of arms. That is formal equality without functional equality. This is why participation integrity is so important. Participation integrity means a person must not merely be present in proceedings. They must be able to understand, respond, organize evidence, engage safely, and participate meaningfully. A person can be physically present and still be procedurally silenced. A person can be allowed to speak and still not be truly heard. A person can file evidence and still have the pattern missed. So the question is not only, was there a process? The question is, did the process allow the truth to be seen? This is the question at the heart of SAFECHAIN. SAFECHAIN is a reform framework built around evidential continuity, participation integrity, and trauma-informed justice. Its core principle is simple. Where harm is patterned, evidence must be integrated. This means we cannot keep treating coercive control as if it is a series of disconnected events. We need systems that can connect the dots. SAFECHAIN asks, what patterns or what pattern does the evidence reveal over time? What institutional silos are hiding parts of the truth? What financial records need to be cross-checked and when? What vulnerability factors affect participation? What procedural safeguards are required? What behavior continues after separation? What is being framed as legal process but functioning as control? This is not about removing judicial discretion. No, it's about improving judicial process. It's about strengthening it, because a judge can only decide properly if factual merit is coherent, if factual metrics is coherent. So a solicitor can only advise properly if the evidence is connected. A survivor can only participate properly if the process does not produce the imbalance they are trying to escape. SAFECHAIN is about moving from recognition to operational integrity. Recognition says coercive control exists. Operational integrity says we will build systems capable of seeing it. Now let us return to the psychology of the person who never takes responsibility. Why this is never their fault? Because accountability requires an internal structure that can tolerate shame. A healthy person says, I hurt you, I was wrong, I need to repair this. I understand why you feel or felt unsafe. I will change my behavior. But a narcissistic dynamic, accountability is experienced as humiliation. So instead of repair, you get defense. Instead of remorse, you get justification. Instead of honesty, you get narrative control. They may say, "You made me do this. You are too sensitive. You are unstable. You are fragile. You are imagining things. You are obsessed with the past. You are abusive. You are the abusive one. You know, and no one else has problems with me. Look at how emotional you are." This is psychologically powerful because it forces the survivor away from the original harm into defensive mode. Now, the survivor is no longer asking, "Why did you harm me?" They are trying to prove they are not crazy, not bitter, not greedy, not unstable, not vindictive, not difficult. This is the trap. So you're caught. The argument moves from behavior to powerful person to the credibility of the harmed person. And if the systems are not trained to see that shift, they may participate in the harm itself through procedure. That is why this masterclass is not only about relationships, it is about institutes, because systems can be manipulated by people who understand image, language, status, and process. The most dangerous person in the legal dispute is always the loudest, the one who comes with the biggest bundle, the one who pulls information that does not matter. Sometimes the calmest person, sometimes it is the one who knows how to appear reasonable while withholding the full truth. Sometimes it is the one who can afford to exhaust the other person. Sometimes it is the one who turns procedure into pressure. And this is why we need pattern recognition. Pattern recognition asks, who benefits from confusion? Who controls the documents? Who controls the money? Who controls the narratives? Who keeps shifting the issue? Who refuses transparency? Who uses delay? Who appears reasonable in public but threatening in private? Who claims victimhood when accountability is requested? These are not small questions. They are evidential questions. They belong in the analysis. Now let us address victims of domestic or survivors directly for a moment. If you have lived through this, you may have spent years asking why you were not enough, why they were not satisfied, why did they need someone else, why did they keep returning, why did they punish you for loving them, why did they blame you for what they created? Here is the truth. You were never dealing with a normal hunger. You were dealing with a system of needs that no partner could feel. You could have been the most patient, most beautiful, the most forgiving, the most successful, more silent, more available, more understanding, it still could not have been enough, because the emptiness was not yours to feel. The instability was not yours to regulate. The accountability was not yours to carry. And the pattern was not proof of your failure. It was evidence of their structure. That is a powerful shift, because once you understand the structure, you stop begging the pattern to become love. You stop asking a system of contradictions to become a place of safety. You stop negotiating with distortion. You begin to reclaim reality. And reclaiming reality is the beginning of freedom. But individual freedom is not enough. We also need systematic reform, because survivors should not have to become forensic analysts of their own harm just to be believed. They should not have to gather impossible levels of evidence while traumatized. They should not have to translate coercive control into a language the system should already understand. They should not have to appear calm in order to be credible. They should not have to lose everything before the pattern is taken seriously. That is why SAFECHAIN matters. SAFECHAIN is not a concept. It is a response to a failure to connect evidence, a failure to protect participation, a failure to recognize patterned harm, a failure to understand that abuse can migrate into process. The future of justice must be trauma-informed. Pattern recognition and structural accountability should be enshrined in process. It must understand that coercive control is not simply an allegation. It is a system of behavior. It must understand that narcissistic dynamics are not just personality flaws. They can become litigation strategies. It must understand that evidence is not always obvious when separated into fragments. It must understand that the person who controls the story may not be the person telling the truth. So, as we close this masterclass, I want to leave you with this. Power without accountability is not strength. It is danger. Law without pattern recognition is not justice. It is procedure. Protection without evidential continuity is not safeguarding. It is aspirational. And participation without integrity is not fairness. It is appearance. The work now is to move beyond appearance, beyond isolated incidents, beyond polished narratives, beyond procedural blindness, beyond systems that say recognize abuse but fail to see it when it changes form. We need justice that can connect and correct. Justice that can listen and implement. Justice that can recognize the difference between distress and dishonesty. Justice that can identify control even it arrives in a suit, a statement, a spreadsheet, or a court application. Justice that understands that where harm is patterned, evidence must be integrated. That is the heart of this masterclass. That is the heart of SAFECHAIN. And that is the future we must build. Thank you for attending this masterclass. Share it with someone who needs to hear it.